I think it was October when I first read about Choady's death in the newspaper. I was sitting out on the porch reading, under one of those big, dusky skies that only a Midwestern autumn can paint, burning orange, pink, and blue as God Almighty snuffed out the embers of another heavenly butt into the ashtray of the horizon. I know it was October, because I remember noticing how quickly the trees had changed. It seemed as if within the span of only a few days they had suddenly become so barren and pale, so alarmingly naked that they appeared almost skeletal to me, with just a few deciduous holdouts clutching pathetic handfuls of orange and yellow to their bony white limbs. Those suburban sentinels of fall, lining both sides of the sleepy little avenue in the Illinois suburb I now called my home, just outside of Chicago. And ooh, the spooky sent a willy up my ass. As I wrestled with the pages, the news came off black in my hands, and I recall feeling a sudden chill, as if some alien draft had suddenly worked its way into the nape of my being. Not a seasonal chill, not the bite of winter's promise or a transient cold pocket, but that foreboding chill one gets when the mind senses death in the air. It was one of those small-town newspapers, my hometown, as a matter of fact, back in the Golden State, just outside the City of Angels. I no longer lived in California, hadn't for some time, but my brother still mailed me the news from back home so I could keep up on the local dirt. I suppose it could have been September, but I'm pretty sure it was October because of that distinctly druid feel of solstice in the air, that sharp, steely air that cuts the cheek and lungs, with the acrid scent of wood smoke and burning jack-o'-lantern wafting here and there, conjuring up 1,000 childhood ghosts. My initial reaction was, of course, shock when I read about my old friend, Choady Owens, gone. My old friend Choady. I couldn't believe my eyes. But then again, I never really trusted my eyes. They're just too damn shifty. Pasty little orbs with a tiny network of red lightning breaking across the whites, from too much work and booze and not enough Z's. But there it was, right in front of me in the obituary column, right next to a story about 7 kids flossing to death on candied apple razor blades. Yeah, I guess it must have been October. A few days later, a letter came.
Dear Jack, how are you, my old friend? Did you hear Choady's done scratched and popped his last on this big blue marble? Goddamn shame, too. He went from cum laude to kumbaya in one fatal stroke. The one stroke too many that blew his spleen out of his urethral meatus. I've contacted all the other guys either by mail or phone and would have called you too, only your number is unlisted. I guess on account of you being kind of a famous writer. So yours is the last letter I have to write and perhaps the most difficult. I guess partly because you and I were so close. In fact, I was just thinking the other day how out of all the guys in the old gang, you and I always seem to be the closest, if you know what I mean. Nothing faggy, you understand. Just close in a guy kind of way. After all, only you and I could ever truly understand the platonic hand job. Anyway, the services will be held at the African Episcopal Church of the Talking Drum, and we're all planning to meet at Monceau Glue's and leave from there. Looking forward to seeing you there. Just wish it could be under more pleasant circumstances. P.S. I read your last novel, and to be perfectly honest, I didn't understand a word. But my wife said she...
I had no idea who'd written the letter. It wasn't signed, there was no return address, and the handwriting, if you could call it handwriting, Crayola on a big chief tablet, wasn't familiar to me. But I felt compelled to go along with it. After all, this was an old friend. So I took the next flight out of O'Hare to LAX. I looked forward to seeing the gang, although it would seem strange seeing the old neighborhood again, maybe even a little scary. After all, someone once said, I think it was Buddy Holly, you can't fly home again. The flight seemed unusually long to me, and the hum of the engines put me into a pensive mood. After watching the oxygen mask and vomit bag demonstration, my mind began to wander, and I got to thinking back on the old days when we all used to sit around at Monceau Glue's Chinese restaurant and coffee house, wearing those massive smoky glasses and smoking with those glassy eyes at half-mast, laughing, drinking, bumming the occasional butt, or just pontificating on the general state of politics in this crazy, topsy-turvy little dung heap they call Mother. It was a time of cultural over-rest and social unconsciousness unleashed, of berets and bad poetry. A time when protest and rebellion hung in the air like a blast of methane from a hipster's hot and sweaty bumpus. We were all there, and we were all so cool it hurt like freezer burns. It was a hip kind of hurt. On a good night, we could even con Monceau Glue himself with a bribe of a couple of neighborhood cats for his freezer to let us into the back room, which served as a kind of combination opium den, conference room, and seed depository. Some called it the Poet's Petri. Others knew it simply as the Jackatorium. I can only assume after yours truly. But we in the round always referred to it as that little fucking room. Many was the time we'd gather in a circle on the floor with our hookahs and pillows and our hand lotion and a box of Kleenex. Or if you were a real man, a beach towel. And share a hairy little session of artistic self-flagellation to the rhythms of jazz. Or perhaps to a syncopated beat of our own if you were thoroughly inclined. This was our source of inspiration, each with his own instrument at hand and muse overhead. There was good old Gob Spillin, who was always ready with a song, usually a beaty little ballad with a real nasty harmonica blast right at the peak of his soul purgin'. Everyone would say when Gob sings, he really spills his nuts out.
How does it feel to be honing your own? Spray your opal tone while you're erection prone, like a flowing bone.
And then there was Veal Flaccidly, the man who taught us everything we knew about 5 against 1, strafing the linen, choking the chicken, waxing the lotus, helping the hypo, loping the mule, calling the tadpoles, yanking the franken, coaxing the seed, tugging the stud, frothing the member, hammering the pink nail,
sanctifying the flesh pope, shaking hands with the bishop, hoeing the truffle, polishing the dolphin, sapping the maple, heisting the homer, killing the family, fooling the tool, scamming the horn, robbing Cortez, milking your udder, meeting Mr. Beardsley, honing the honker, fishing for wogs, dialing the future. You think you guys got that?
I think so. What was number 16 again?
And no session would have been complete without a spontaneously composed poem by Aylin Gisburn, who on one particularly inspired occasion composed his epic masterpiece, Towel, which later became the anthem for the off generation.
I got the best heads in my little circle annoyed by my own mediocre drivel. Pretentious, anesthetized, overblown, and rated, flogging themselves with literary puds at all-white coffee houses in search of a pissy fit, pseudo-intellectual troglodytes longing for the groupie clap, and ego-stroking wahoos to saute their lofty abysmal fuck, who's sleepy and weepy, and why should I have to get a real job? I'm a poet! I'm a goddamn artist! I don't want to clean up after myself! I don't want to go to school! I'm sick! My dog ate it! He pushed me first! You goddamn motherfucking titty-sucking blue-balled bastard! Hey, hand me that towel, will you?
We were the off generation. But we had managed to become self-sufficient, self-contained. We had raised mental masturbation and unemployment insurance to new heights and had turned egoism, chemical abuse, and spraying a warm, bleachy blot of our very own into a brass cum tune at 20 paces into a new art form. We were all way out, way up and way, way off, off in our own world to be sure, which is where I guess they coined the name. Offniks, they called us. We would be offing for hours on end, sometimes even ending on hours, on or off. In fact, I think I can say without fear of contradiction that we were all more offing than not. Except William. I think he had a viral thing and it got to looking magenta. But the rest of us were masters of often challenging each other to often contests, often too often, much too often, until someone would have to get out the gauze and iodine and we'd spend the next few days nursing our chafy man roots with lotion motion up around the belly beard. And then we were ready for action once again, to go the distance. I believe my own record approached 6.5 feet. Those who were able to hit the wallpaper, of course, were immediately inducted into the Offers Hall of Fame. It was the Olympics of self-indulgence. L.A. Shit. As I was leaving the jet plane, I didn't know when I'd be back, if ever. So I grabbed my coat, grabbed my hat, made a cab just in time. As I looked out at the old neighborhood from the window of my big yellow taxi, I couldn't shake the feeling that they'd paved over paradise and put up a Thrifty's Junior's. The cab pulled in front of MSG's restaurant. Chinese restaurant and coffee house. The place seemed none the worse for wear, and there was Veal with that tender look in his eyes, as always absent-mindedly thumbing his nuts with fervor.
Jack, you made it. You remember my cousin Fervor?
How's it shaking, Ferv?
Hither and thither.
Great. Now beat it, will you? Jack and I got a lot to talk about.
Okay, if you want me, I'll be in the thesaurus with zeal and zest.
The funeral was simple, very traditional, really. A very lovely ceremony, really. At first, we felt a bit out of place, even conspicuous, you might say, like pigeon shit on newly laid asphalt. But after a while, we started to lighten up, or should I say, tone down. And before we knew it, we were fitting right in, especially Aylin, who shimmied, cuckooed, and bopped his way through the entire eulogy.
Brothers and sisters, what is a man's life? What is his purpose on this big blue mother we call dung heap?
Amen. Tell it to the mountain. Yes, yes. Hallelujah. Lordy, lordy. What it is.
Excuse me. Y'all want to tell that Jew boy to stuff a yarmulke in it?
Oi.
But brothers and sisters, let us not dwell on the end, but on the beginning. Let us not look to the light, but the darkness, and see from whence we came. For our brother Choady cannot beat this rap, and that, brothers and sisters, is because this here's a death rap for a dead beat. But let me wrap this up proper by wrapping it tight. Shall I wrap this, brothers and sisters?
Yeah.
I say, shall I wrap this, brothers and sisters?
No thanks. We'll eat it here.
Well, yo, with your heads down, glancing at your watches, and your hands folded reverently all over your crotches, and your faces all sad as can be, aren't you really just thinking shit better him than me?
Afterward, we said our goodbyes, and I caught the next flight to Chicago. The circle has been broken by and by, Chode, by and by. This was one king of stain whose white reign was over. There's a little dry spot on the wall today. It's the same old thing as I can't remember when. Oh, Sting, where is thy death?